Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Tom, am I loud enough now? Okay, good. We'll be starting in just a couple of seconds. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. The Wild Rose, Danielle Smith, will be on in just a moment. We want a couple more party supporters to get on this call if they can. We have a whole bunch of guests to bring up tonight. I think you're going to find this very educational and informative. If, after we start taking questions, you want to ask a question, you can do so by pressing 0 on the keypad on your phone if you have a question. That's 0 on the keypad on your phone. And keep them directed more towards party line, not specific neighborhood dilemmas or problems or anything like that, but involving the Wild Rose and the government and everything else directly. That's the kind of questions we're going to be taking tonight. If we don't have your most up-to-date email address, and that has changed of late, please press 7. Press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you have a new email address or you haven't given us your email address in the past. We always want to be able to communicate with you. Email is one of the better ways. So press 7 on the keypad on your phone if you want to provide us your email address. And again, later, we're taking questions. And so if you have a question, it's very important that you hit 0 on the keypad on your phone. Danielle, we have a good amount of people on this call already. Take it away, please.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of how we're going to go through. We have a number of presentations to make at the beginning, and we're hoping by about quarter past we'll be in a position where we'll be able to open it up for question and answers. As Kurt said, press 0 if you want to get in the lineup to ask questions. We are trying to focus this one mostly on some of the party matters that we're going to be raising on this call. And so what I wanted to start off with is telling you the main purpose for this is we know that we are going to have to advance our planning for our upcoming election. I know everybody is working towards a 2016 fixed election window, but it probably won't surprise you that the government has built in a loophole into that law which allows them to go earlier. So I want to talk to you about some of the different windows that we're going to be looking at potentially for when the next election is likely to be, but we suspect it is going to happen much sooner than May of 2016. I want to then turn it over to Dave Yeager, who will give an update on some of the great progress that we've made in party operations and the executive committee. And then Derek Frum, who's our acting VP of policy, is going to give an update about our policy and constitution conference, which is coming up in November. So we've got some deadlines that we need to work towards over the course of the summer to make sure that we get policy and constitution amendments in. Then I do want to talk in a bit more detail when we've got everybody on the line about what our plan for nominations are and how we're going to expedite that. And then throughout, we'll be doing a number of poll questions just to get some feedback from you about whether you like this medium and if we should do this kind of call again with our members. And if you have, you'll see what the other poll questions are. But with that, why don't I turn it over to Dave and he can give us a quick update on how things are going on the party side.
Thanks, Danielle, and hello, Alberta. I think the proper thing to do is start by thanking my fellow members on the executive committee. There's 16 or 17 volunteers, I guess we expanded by one from across Alberta, who dedicate their time as volunteers. I know there's a lot of volunteers on the phone, but the work done by the EC has been absolutely extraordinary in terms of some of the projects we've done and the heavy lifting and behind the scene things we do to keep the party going. But the one thing I'd like to mention tonight, and I've talked about it if you've been to the AGMs or where I've had an opportunity to speak, one of the things that we introduced over the winter was what I call mission and core values. And I'll just read the preamble. In its journey from inception to a major political force, Wild Rose will experience success and failure, opportunities and challenges. Organizations which mature from a group of like-minded individuals to a cohesive single-purpose entity do so because they have a clear purpose and guidelines to provide focus and direction. And so the mission is simply to form government. And I call this an unqualified mission, but I will say that the mission is paramount. That's the purpose of the party. Teamwork ensures success. This can't be done by one individual. Embrace and practice our core values, which I'll go through. And guided by Wild Rose policy and principles, meaning, yes, we want to form government, and that's our purpose, but obviously we have to do within the framework member ratified policy and principles. And just some of the core values, the basic ones, is we operate with integrity. We listen to all stakeholders, and again, we're here to listen to what Albertans want and see if we can't give it to them. We seek continuous improvement. We're always trying to do better. We share what we learn. We communicate openly. We require that teamwork requires relationships, respect, and dignity. And this is the manner in which we'll engage with each other and obviously the public. We will communicate politely and effectively. And we understand that Wild Rose business is our business, simply that if there is things that we deal with internally, they should stay internal. And the reason that this is important at this time in history is, as Danielle has said, and we're going to talk about tonight, we could be going into a period where we're having an early election. There'll certainly be one within 2 years and perhaps in an accelerated timetable because of the PC leadership bid. So I put this all out for all of you to consider of why we're here. And as we go through the various nomination processes and so on, that no matter what the outcome of the nominations, that we come out as a unified team and work together to fulfill our mission, which is to form government. And I think we're more qualified than we've ever been. Just before I finish up, I've just got a couple minutes here. I'd like to thank Caucus for their outstanding work. I think this is one of the things that we've done that probably isn't recognized enough, but we only had 2 experienced MLAs that were reelected after the last election. 2 of them lost their seats. And one of the questions that Albertans had in the last election, are we ready to govern? And due to the outstanding work of our 17 MLAs, we have a critic on every file. We know them inside out. We've been through 2 rounds of budget estimates now, where by department, we've sat down with the minister and the deputy ministers and learned that. So to go back to our mission to form government, we have the team to do it. And thank you all very much. Take it away, Danielle.
Thanks for that, Dave, and thanks to the Executive Committee as well. They've made incredible progress over the last year with the party office and revising the website, changing and improving our database, and a whole variety of other functions. So thanks for the work that you do there, Dave, as well. Let me just then move to the political context that we're talking about, and I appreciate the kind words of Dave. I think our caucus team has just been absolutely tremendous. We've been so good and so effective that we are now going to be on our 4th premier in as many years when we see a new leader elected in September of this year. So here's a couple of things that I just want to keep on at top of mind for everybody as we're looking towards who the new premier might be. What we have said, and we will continue to say, that regardless of whether it's an outsider candidate or an insider candidate, they face the exact same problems. They've got 60 colleagues who have put Alberta in the mess that we're in, and one person is not going to be able to change this. Regardless of who ends up getting elected, we still have a budget that puts us $21 billion in debt by the next election, a healthcare system that is a mess, a variety of bills that have infringed on property rights, and a whole battery of new problems that seem to emerge every day, not the least of which being the incredible entitlement and ethical lapses that we see virtually across every department. So we do not believe that any one leader is going to be able to change this. We think there are serious problems within the PC party. And I think what you'll likely see over the course of the next number of months is this always happens is that during a leadership race, regardless of which party it is, the amount of coverage that happens of the different contenders and the policy ideas cause them to increase in the polls. What we've seen with the PCs is that of the 4 leaders that they've chosen in the past, Don Getty, Ralph Klein, Alison Redford, and Stelmach, 3 of those 4 went to an election within 6 months of the completion of their leadership contest. Mr. Stelmach went 14 months later. But in all cases, what they were trying to capitalize on was the boost in public sentiment and popularity that occurs as a result of a contested leadership race. We have no reason to believe that this one is going to be different. The fact of the matter is that we know that the outsider candidate, Mr. Prentice, appears to be trying to angle for a coronation, and let's face it, we're now a number of 2 months after Ms. Redford resigned. He's the only one who is currently in the race, having put up both his signatures and his deposit in. Rick McIver has not filed his papers yet. Thomas Lukasik is talking about potentially filing papers, but at this moment, we don't actually have a contest in that race. We'll know by June the 1st whether or not there's going to be more than one contestant. But even still, we have seen in the past that just because somebody enters the race doesn't mean that they're going to complete it. Well, we can only assume that as of June 1st, those who are in the race are going to fight it out until the first ballot, which is on September the 6th. So that could be the second date that we're looking at when we might know who the premier is, if that person gets 50% of the vote. If not, it will go to a second ballot on September the 20th. So it will be very short order that we know who it is that we'll be facing. If it is Mr. Prentice who does not have a seat, he will then have to take a choice of going to a by-election within 6 months to be able to get into the legislature, or going to a full general election. What we found for governing parties is by-elections can be very dangerous for them, because that's an opportunity for the public to express their dissatisfaction with them. And so we're of the view that there's a very high likelihood that rather than going to a contested by-election, we would see that Mr. Prentice, should he win, go to a full election. So the windows that we're looking at potentially having to be prepared for is there's 4 different windows. The fixed election window law that they have does not define a particular date. It just says that they can't go any later than May of 2016. But in reading through the legislation, they've actually given themselves wiggle room to go early. The Lieutenant Governor and Council can be asked at any time to call an early election. That's why we believe that they may exercise that option. So if there is a coronation, there is an outside chance that we would be looking at having election this fall within 6 months of June the 1st. We think that is probably a less likely scenario, because the party is still in fairly bad financial shape, so they will still need to raise some money. If the next window happens to open up, that if the candidate is chosen on September the 6th, we think there's a very high likelihood that we would be looking at an election in February or March of 2015. So that would be a full year early. There's still a chance that it could be fall of 2015. And an outside chance that it could be spring of 2016. We'll have to wait and see what choice Mr. Prentice, should he be elected, makes in whether or not he calls a by-election right away, because that would give a pretty good indication of whether or not he would intend to govern right until the last possible moment. But we don't think that we can push off our planning and then get caught in a position where we're not ready. So our campaign manager, William Macbeth, has recommended to the election readiness team and to the executive committee that we fast-track our nominations. We had initially intended to start them this summer, but what we would like to do is start them a little bit earlier. We're intending to launch the first ones in June, and we want to be able to have more than half of our candidates in place by the end of October. We feel if we get to that point, then we'll be in very good shape to be able to complete the rest of our candidate selection should there be a February or March election call. And it also gives us a chance to pause and take stock of the political landscape at that time, to be able to make sure that we are aware of what the different options may be, and if it looks like it's going to be delayed, then we have 50 candidates who are able to start door knocking early, and we can go a little bit slower on that. But we do want to be able to have an opportunity to get as many candidates in place as possible through contested nominations, so that we are ready for an early call. With that in mind, we have to be aware that that will impact our policy conference in November. I want to now turn it over to Derek Frum, our acting VP policy, so that he can explain the parallel process that we'll be going through to make sure that we have got policy and constitutional amendments ready to go in November. But I hope you can understand that because of the political reality we're facing, our fall AGM may turn into being more focused on our election readiness, candidate and campaign team training, as we have done in previous years when we get close to an election. If it looks like we have a little bit more time, we'll be able to do more policy and more constitution. We won't be able to make that decision until we know what the lay of the land is in October. So we want to make sure that we continue to advance on the policy and constitution side, and then we'll be able to do another update with you once we have a better handle on what direction the governing party is likely to go. So with that, let me turn it over to Derek, and he can go through some of the factors and timelines that we're working towards to be able to get ready for November. And once again, we'll go into Q&A very shortly here. So please press 0 if you want to line up a question, and Kurt will put you in the queue. And let me just turn it over now to Derek.
Thanks, Danielle. This is Derek speaking. So just to reiterate what was said, we are going to spend less time on policy and constitutional changes in all likelihood this year at the AGM, because the AGM will probably end up being more about election readiness and campaign and candidate training. But we do have one important issue that we do need to deal with. At the AGM, we're going to have to deal with a report and draft constitutional amendments from a special committee that is currently updating the future leadership selection processes. It's not that we it's not that we need it now, but we need to do an update. And that was Danielle brought that to our attention last year at the AGM, and it'll be again on the agenda this year. Okay, and now some important deadlines that are coming up. And like Danielle was saying, this will be parallel. This will be both the policy for changes in policy and for changes in the Constitution as well. So if you're one of the Constitution nuts like me, you can turn to 10.3 and 12.2 in the party Constitution. The first will be a notice will come out for any changes to policy and changes to the party Constitution, and it will be sent to all members by July 16th, and that's 120 days prior to the AGM. So if you have your pencils out, that's July 16th, 120 days prior. Secondly, all proposed policy and constitutional changes will be submitted to the chairman of the Policy and Constitution Committee by August 15th, and that is 90 days prior to the AGM. And finally, all proposed policy and constitutional changes will be available to party members by September 16th, and that is 60 days prior to the AGM. And that's it, Danielle.
Great, thanks for that, Derek. On the issue of the leadership rules, part of the reason this came to the fore and was debated and discussed at the last AGM is that the progressive conservative leadership rules were changed a couple of years ago because they had a practice of electing the third place finisher as the person who came up and split the two front running vote, and that was part of the reason why we saw both Mr. Stelmach and Ms. Redford elected. They closed that gap, and now only the top two finishers are going to go on to a second ballot. So I had asked if we should look at making the same change in our leadership process. We currently, in our leadership process, have the same policy where the top three finishers would move on to a second ballot. Obviously, this is not going to affect me. It's going to be for my successor when I move on. So it was something that I thought it was important for us to address right now, in addition to addressing some of the issues involving mail-in ballots. Going back to the issue of nominations, you'll see in the nomination rules, and anyone who is intending to run as a nominee can request a nominations package to nominations@wildrose.ca. You'll get not only your candidate questionnaire, but you'll also get the nomination rules. What you'll see with nominations is that we have shortened the window so that we have a much shorter process. It's essentially a 30-day window. Our intention is to open up nominations on the first Wednesday of every month so that we're constantly rolling through a number of different nominations, 8 to 10 with each batch that we release. The rules are very similar to what you've seen before. Aside from that, we've gotten rid of of absentee ballots and mail-in ballots. We had a big problem we noticed with Canada Post delivering ballots weeks, if not months, after the fact. And to make sure no one's disenfranchised, we want to go about it differently this time by having in-person ballot stations. So that's another of the big changes. But I just wanted everyone to be aware that since we are now into this new window where we're uncertain of what the political landscape is going to be, I didn't want anyone caught off guard that we'll be opening up our first nominations in June. I think that's pretty well all I had to say by way of opening comments. I don't know if anyone else wants to pipe in before we get to the Q&A. It might be a good time for us to ask a poll question, Kurt, and just to remind people how they can get their question in the queue.
Okay, a couple things. If you have a question, please press 00 on the keypad on your phone, and we've had people do that now. We've got some people standing in line. A good turnout on that. If you're not getting emails from us, we need your email address. Best way to do that is to press 7 on the keypad on your phone to provide us your latest email address. And I think we're scheduled actually to take our first question and then do a polling question. So I've been told to go to Robert. Robert, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Robert, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from Cochrane, and my comment and question is what is the party intending to do about vetting of candidates, and particularly when you hearken back to the election where we lost, we slid in the polls in the last week. I'm wondering if we are going.
Oh,
Danielle, your thoughts?
Sorry, Robert. I got the gist of your question there. I hope you don't feel that we cut you off. Just wanted to get to the answer so we can get to as many questions as we can. It's a very good question, Robert, and I've heard loud and clear from all of our members at various different forums that they do want us to do a better job of vetting our candidates. So what we have done is we've enhanced our questionnaire, so there are more questions that you have to answer, particularly if you're a returning candidate. In addition, we'll go through the same process we did before with an RCMP check, as well as a check to make sure there aren't any legal judgments outstanding. We are asking our local candidate selection committees to be a lot more rigorous in the questions that they ask to would-be candidates. And if they think that somebody cannot express themselves in a way that is going to show respect for all Albertans, then we would hope that we would not see them chosen as candidates at the local level. We do know that that everybody has a much higher expectation of how our candidates are going to express themselves. And not everybody's cut out for public office. There's lots of ways to contribute in the public policy sphere and in the public sphere, but we have to make sure that we're going to select candidates who will be able to represent the party well and who are not going to have any kinds of outbursts that could impact our ability to win as a whole. So that's one part, is that it really does begin at the local level. We continue to have our provincial candidate nominating committee, which deals with the issue of disqualifications. If we do find that there are candidates that do not meet that high bar, then there is a disqualification process and they can appeal all the way up to the executive committee, but the provincial candidate nominating committee is the first stop for dealing with that. I can tell you we do have a team of people on standby waiting as our candidates are selected to make sure that we do a full vetting of them through all of the different mechanisms that we have on what has been produced publicly on Twitter or on Facebook, on blog sites. So we heard the message loud and clear that people want us to do a much better job of making sure that we know everything about our candidates before our opponents do. So that we feel with those different mechanisms, we should be able to make sure that we don't have any problems going into the next election. Dave, I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, but I know that this is an area that you're quite concerned about too.
Well, I was a candidate in the last election, for those of you who don't know or don't remember. But I could feel the air go out of our tires in the last part of the campaign as this issue blew up, and we've been asked this question over and over. The only thing I would add to the very, very rigorous nomination and screening process that we've introduced since the last election is another great way to solve this problem, and have a whole bunch of people want to be Wildrose candidates, increase the selection pool. And that's something that we've really seen with the progress the government has made. That's why my earlier comment on the effectiveness of our 17 MLAs was so trenchant, is we have well over 100 people have requested nomination papers thus far. And that's a really good sign. The sort of people that are stepping up and want to be Wildrose candidates is improving, as is our internal processes. So that's my 2 cents worth, Danielle.
Our next questioner, Danielle, is Mike. Mike, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting we're having. Mike, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Hi, I'm Mike, down another individual from Cochrane. I guess the primary question that I had is, so what if he runs uncontested and he gets in? How do you see that unfolding?
I think it would be terrible for the PC party if they hold a leadership contest and no one shows up, and that if they actually have done all this backroom dealing to force the front runner into a coronation rather than a contest. Because what happens in a leadership contest is where you actually see the ideas that get put on the table. And I think it would not bode well for the party if they ended up having one person emerge without a contest. It's happened in the past. I think we saw, for instance, with Paul Martin. He was the clear front runner and pretty well sailed into victory. When you look at what happened with Ignatieff, again, a clear front runner who managed to get the job uncontested. And it turned out to be disastrous in both of those cases. So from our perspective, we we don't think that would be a bad outcome. So that's why I'm not entirely sure that that is going to happen, though they seem to be working very, very hard to try to make that the outcome. I would say that if we do end up seeing Mr. Prentice, the Premier, as of June the 1st, we'll have to regroup as an election readiness team and assess out the likelihood of there being a fall election. Again, because they have now entered into a period where they have $1 million on their line of credit, we've seen that they can raise money pretty quickly, but it would be very difficult, I think, over the summer for them to raise enough to feel comfortable about going into a fall election. Still an outside chance that that might happen, but we're still thinking the most likely window would be spring of next year.
We're going to do our first poll question of the night. Finding just the right balance of how often to contact party members can be difficult. On the question of how often Wild Rose should communicate and contact members, do we contact you too much, not enough, or just right? You got three possibilities here, so how they're read. Press 1 if it's Wild Rose contacts me too often. Press 2 on the keypad on your phone if the Wild Rose should contact members more often. Or press 3 if you think the combination is just right of emails, calls, and letters that are sent to you, and it is the right level of communication. So 1 is too often, 2 is we need more contact, or 3 is just about right. We really appreciate your participation. We're going to take Grayson next. Grayson, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Grayson, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from Calgary, Alberta. I got a couple of points. One, transparency. I don't care if it's provincial or federal. Everybody wants their parliaments, all their politicians to be totally transparent with both with how they come to their decisions and 2, their expenses. The other part I would like to see the Wild Rose come up with is sort of like the Red Book that the Liberals had, where they can state their policies well in advance and then people know precisely what they stand for.
Great points, Grayson, and you're absolutely right. We did support the government finally when they did get busted on misusing their expense accounts. Premier Redford came forward with an expense policy that posts everybody's expenses online. So you can, if you are interested in that, you can go to www.assembly.ab.ca and click on each of the MLAs and see what their most recent expense report is. I think it gets reported quarterly. So we agree with that approach. We'd continue that approach, and we think that the only problem is that there seems to be still a few breaking rules on the other side in government. But I can tell you that all of our Wild Rose MLAs have their expenses posted on a quarterly basis. On the issue of a red book, you're absolutely right. Last time around we had what we called our green book, and it was very extensive. It was a jumping off point from our member pass policies, where we identified the policies that we felt we would be able to implement in our first term in office. With the changes that were made at the AGM last fall, we had to revise that book, and we're working on relaunching it policy by policy. So we're very much thinking along the same lines. It may be a little more streamlined because we heard that the other one might have been a bit too thick, but we'd welcome your feedback as we start releasing those policies, but we'll very much have the kind of document that you're suggesting, Grayson. So thanks for that feedback.
Let's take another question if we can. We're going to take it from Steve. Steve, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Steve, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from Vulcan County, and I'm in Ian Donaldson's riding. My question is, what is it that you guys are really planning to do to publish out, your policies? I've done some secondary marketing, and what's happened is that 83% of the people I've polled, which is about 1,000 people, they don't know the policies of the Wild Rose Party, and they're terrified that nothing's there. It needs to be more abundant, closer to what, so people can access it, not just on internet, but like in other elections, I'm from Ontario originally, Trudeau used to mail things out all the time.
Danielle, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Steve, it's a great point, and we'll have to take that back to the team to figure out other ways in which we can get our policies out. It is the case that we do rely an awful lot on electronic media. If you go onto our website, we've posted our press release. I think we've done something like 1,300 press releases since we became the Wild Rose opposition. We also, in the past, prior to the last election, had 15 different policy statements that was in addition to our 350 member-passed policies that are on the website, and they're currently on the website. Plus, we did 4 commitments of different policies just prior to the campaign launch. Plus, we did our entire policy platform where we focused on 5 particular pledges, we called them, in leading up to the election. So we're going to take a similar approach, because we do believe that ideas matter, that you can't just tell people why they shouldn't vote for the other guys. You have to also tell them why they should vote for you. As for how we get that out beyond the electronic medium, we'll give some thought to what you had said. It can be very costly to try to mail out to 2.4 million voters. We have to do that on the party side. The government does those kind of mailings using taxpayer dollars. We don't do that, and so we do have some limitations in the period leading up to the election where we can do that sort of thing. But we certainly would want to make sure that we've got paper documents available to hand out to every door during an election campaign. So I can't promise you that we'll be able to get our full platform out prior to the election, but I can tell you that we will be making sure that we've got lots of materials for drop-off in the election campaign. The other thing about how we're now direct marketing our ideas to a number of different groups. For instance, when we did our municipal announcement where we talked about our 1010 Community Infrastructure Plan, we sent it out electronically to every single council member on all 350 plus councils in the province. So we are finding ways of being able to directly get our message to the voter groups that we think are most interested in that. We're getting more sophisticated at that as we go along, and so that may be another avenue that we use. I know it's electronic and that doesn't address your first point, but do know that we're trying a whole variety of different mechanisms to be able to get our message directly to people.
If you wanted to provide us your email address, this will be the last time I ask tonight and bother you about it. Please press 7 on the keypad on your phone for email addresses. We have plenty of questions lined up, that's for darn sure. We're going to do our next polling question because it's pertinent to this last question, and here goes. Finding just the right way to communicate with party members is something that we also work hard at getting right. We have many ways of communicating with members, and we're always trying to find ways to communicate with members in a way that is best for them, rather. We have several choices: emails, calls, more meetings, more letters. Here goes with the 4 possibilities of which way you like the best. Would you like the Wild Rose to principally contact you through emails? Press 1. Press 2 on the keypad on your phone if you'd like the Wild Rose should principally contact you through calls and live callers. Press 3 if you think the ideal way for the Wild Rose to communicate to you is to invite you to more meetings, or press 4 if you would prefer that the party principally contact you through mailed letters. So those are the 4 possibilities. We really appreciate your participation. While you're voting, we're going to take Hans. Hans, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Hans, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Hello?
Hans, go ahead. Yeah, Hans, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Okay, my question is, what is the Wild Rose Party's stance on private schools?
Thanks, Hans. Our stance on private schools is we would maintain the funding that we currently have. When I was on the board of I was a school board trustee for a public system and then a trustee for a private school. And at that time, the government had increased the amount of money to private schools to 70% of the basic student grant. So if you're in the public system, your child will get about $10,000 per child that flows through with all of the different grants that are available. It works out in the public system because it only applies to the operating grant of about $4,300 per student. So our members have told us, and we've pledged that we would maintain the current level of funding for private schools.
Thank you so much. Let's take another question. It's going to be from Marie. Marie, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Marie, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'm wondering why the Wild Rose is not asking for an early provincial election. The federal government is, when we had all those elections, they're saying that they don't have confidence in the government, and we had to have another federal election. Why when this is our third premier to be in less than 4 years, why are we not asking for an early provincial election?
It's a great question, Marie, and it may be that we ultimately, pardon me, it may be that we ultimately end up asking for that, because I recall, I think it was Stockwell Day who challenged Mr. Chrétien to an early election, and then sure enough he got one. And I don't know if everything was in place and ready for them to be able to do that. And we want to make sure that if we're going to call for an early election, that we've lined up everything that we need to on the party side. We had initially been doing all of our planning with the idea that it would be May of 2016, and it was the world changed on March of 19. So we're doing our best to speed things up, but some of these things just take time because we do have a grassroots selection process for our candidates, and we do have another AGM that we have to be planning for November. So we want to make sure that we've got two parallel tracks going, but clearly, if we do end up in the fall with half of our candidates in place and our party is feeling comfortable, our election readiness team is feeling comfortable, our executive committee is feeling comfortable with where we're at on our election planning, it may be that we do call for the government to seek a renewed mandate. I'll leave that open for now until I can see how the rest of that planning goes. But I do tend to agree with you. If we go to 2016, I think somebody put this out on Twitter just a couple of days ago, if we go to 2016, we will have 6 of the last 10 years where we've had a premier in the office without a mandate because of the way in which they've replaced their candidates midstream over the past decade, and that's not democratic. So it's still very much on our radar screen, Marie, but at the moment we just think it would be premature to call for an election because I think we still need to do a few more things to get ready for it.
We're going to take another question right away, and then we're going to do a polling question again after that. Jerry's up next. Jerry, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Jerry, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from High River, and I want to ask Danielle, what is she doing to press hard on this issue of debt? Does the government really understand just how bad the interest element on this can mount up and also compound?
The government does understand, but I don't think they care. We have raised the issue pretty well. I've probably asked at least 1 or 2 questions on it every single week that we've been in the legislature. We've launched our own debt clock where we keep track of how much debt is being racked up on a daily basis. In almost all of my speeches, I've been doing town halls throughout the province since the fall. I've done probably 20 to 25 town halls now, and talking about the level of debt that this government is burdening with us is one of my top talking points. Just so you know just how bad a situation we're in. When Klein left office, he had cleared off the debt and had $17 billion in savings, in addition to our Heritage Savings Trust Fund, which was about $15 billion at the time. We are now in a position, by the time we go into the next election in 2016, where they will have blown through most of our emergency savings in the contingency fund, barely increased the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, and have $21 billion worth of debt that will be generating or requiring $820 million per year in interest charges. And it's the interest charges that always end up creating problems for governments, because it's the interest charges that have to be paid every year and cannibalize dollars away from the things that Albertans would rather see their hard-earned tax dollars spent on. So absolutely, debt is going to be, I think, one of the key differentiating points between us and all of the other political parties, and it will be a very prominent theme during the election campaign. We can't control what the media covers. That's just one thing I would say. Just because I ask 100 questions every 6 months on this doesn't mean the media is going to cover it all the time. But do know that we just do not buy the argument that they're making. And so this is why we have a number of different avenues that we have to get our message directly to the people, whether it's through emails, whether it's through our press releases, or whether it's through town hall meetings. But this is the number one reason why I left the PC party. I was a PC, as you guys know, until 2008, and when they started running deficits, I said, absolutely not. That is, to me, is one of the core values that I have about how a government ought to function. It's not a right-wing or a left-wing issue to me. It's an issue of basic competence, and so nothing has changed except for the fact that 7 years later, we're now in an even worse position with more debt being racked up. So as long as I have a say on it, it will be the number one issue that we campaign on. On the topic of fundraising, finding the right way to reach donors can be difficult.
Please help us understand the most effective way to do so by indicating the last method you used to donate to the Wild Rose in the last year. There's 5 possibilities. How'd you donate? Press 1 if you responded to a fundraising letter. Press 2 if you responded to a fundraising telephone call. Press 3 if you donated in response to an email request. Press 4 if you sent in an unsolicited donation or went online and made an unsolicited donation. Or press 5 if you just haven't donated in the last 12 months. We really appreciate your participation on this. While you're voting, we're going to take Dale. Dale, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Dale, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
Hi, my name's Dale, and I'm from Rosedale. My question is, why is it more difficult for a person who wishes to seek nomination in a constituency that does not have that has an MLA sitting than it is in a constituency where an MLA is not sitting? To me, that is not fair, and it's going to keep people from running.
You know what? I might let Dave give a stab at this, and if I need to add anything more to it, I will. But the rules, the way our Constitution works is that the rules are handed over to the Executive Committee to sign off on. And I can tell you we had lots and lots of conversations. I think we had 3 or 4 different Executive Committee meetings devoted to this topic. But let me turn it over to Dave, and he can help give some understanding of why the Executive made the decisions that they did.
Well, there's a couple of comments. First of all, Wild Rose is still a work in progress in my perspective, in that we have 17 MLAs. The real target number is 44, and so part of the reason is that my personal view is the objective, going back to the mission statement that I opened the call with. I think the number one objective should be electing 27 more MLAs, not necessarily replacing the MLAs who are there. The MLAs who did run with the new party in the 2012 election were in some way pioneers. I think I was a candidate myself in Calgary-Hawkwood, and this was a new party with a new vision and a high-risk proposition. So we felt there should be some bias, some advantage to having done the heavy lifting back in the 2012 campaign, stuck your neck out and gone into the uncharted waters and become a Wild Rose candidate and get elected. On the other hand, we have to have a democratic process, and the democratic process is that if you are an MLA, you have to be accountable to your constituents, in the sense that just because you've got the seat and we can't have a situation where just because you won the election last time that you're therefore grandfathered or you're not subject to review by people in your own riding. And so we felt that in terms of the number of signatures required, and this is the only difference really between the two, is the number of signatures required to be recognized as an officially nominated candidate for an election in a constituency held by a Wild Rose MLA. And so, like I say, the debate went back and forth. Is again with the greater objective of electing 44 instead of 17 to form government. And in that case, you'd say, well, we'll leave the 7. I mean, if that was the only objective, you'd leave the 17 alone. We couldn't do that. That would be undemocratic and on grassroots. On the other hand, at this stage in the party, again, we're still a growing party. The objective is there's 70 seats that didn't elect a Wild Rose MLA last election. And so I wouldn't mind, I was one of them. And so for the politically ambitious, there's no shortage of opportunities in the province. So that's some of the thinking that went on within the EC, and like Danielle said, it was vigorously debated. And so that's why it came out the way it did. And I hope that answers your question satisfactorily.
And we were trying to find the right balance, because I can tell you that there are some staunch supporters of our sitting MLAs who argued that our MLAs should be protected and shouldn't have to face a nomination at all. But you can tell from what Dave said that was not something the Executive Committee wanted to entertain. So we figured that this was a middle ground, that they're all open for contested nominations, but it is a little bit harder to challenge an MLA. Did you want to add something to that, Dave?
Well, I didn't want to say that. Thanks, Danielle, for your candor. That's why I'm here, because that's why I'm a big fan of Danielle Smith. Yeah, there was a school of thought that if you held the seat, you should keep it forever, and that the EC couldn't have that either. So thanks for being fully transparent, as was asked in a previous question, Danielle.
We're going to take
Kurt.
another caller if we can, and it's going to be Katie. Katie, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Katie, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from High River, and my question is, Danielle, I volunteered on your campaign last election, and I was in the High River office, and I was given a call list to phone people to remind them to come out and vote and what have you. And I can't tell you how many people were yelling and cursing at me over another phone call coming in from the Wild Rose. Many people said it was going to stop them from voting for us. Some people were just so livid that they said we're not going out to vote. I'm just wondering this time around, because a lot of people felt like there was a lot of telephone harassment going on, what's going to be different this time?
Such a great question, and I haven't vetted this completely by everybody who's in the decision-making loop, but my preference would be for us to launch the campaign and say we are only going to do robocalls to invite people out to events that we're holding in the riding, and we are going to aim in all of our ridings to have, as we did in High River, live calls on Election Day. Now, that may not be possible in every single riding. That's why I set it out there as a target that we want to have, that if we're going to use the Demon Dial technology, I prefer to do it like we did here, that we're calling you to let you know that we're about to start a live telephone town hall, or to let you know I'm going to be in your area and come on out. But when it comes to the Get Out the Vote Day, it would be, we know with our riding and other MLAs found the same thing, and other candidates found the same thing, that personal touch of a personal phone call makes all the difference. That being said, in some ridings, it may not be possible to have 100 or more volunteers able to do that. So there may be a few select ridings where we do that Get Out the Vote, but we heard that lesson loud and clear. We also got punished for overusing the technology and not using it in full compliance with CRTC. It was not something that we were very proud of. We did end up getting fined for it, which changed our practices completely about how we use the technology. So we heard loud and clear that it's an important technology. We do intend to continue using it, but we're going to use it in a very different way in the next election. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dave.
I think if you look at this, somebody invented the auto dial or the robocall, whatever it was, 5 or 10 years ago, and I was a candidate as well. And I think this is snuck into the politics, and it's not only calls from us, but it's calls from every other party. It got to the point where the Canadian Radio and Television Commission had to clamp down on a national basis, and so I think at some point or another, it's crossing over to the point where maybe you just take your phone off the hook the day an election was called. And so I think that it's come from an innovative technology to give political parties an advantage to something that's permeating the system right across the country. So I'm with Danielle. I guess if everybody else is going to do it, we'll have to play the game to some degree. But if we could find some way to temper it back, certainly make it more human, that would be a great progress.
Let's do another polling question if we can. We need to get this in. We're getting pretty close to our hour, and here goes. These town halls are expensive, but that we think that they're a great way to provide accountability to members. Doing a party-wide telephone town hall can cost up to $5,000. Should we do more of these telephone town halls specifically for party members? Here's the 3 possibilities and what to vote on, and here goes. Press 1 if you'd like the Wild Rose to do 2 or 3 teletown halls with party members every year. Press 2 if you think that 1 teletown hall a year would be just about right. Or press 3 if you don't think we need to do teletown halls except in rare occasions. That's 3. We appreciate your participation. While you're voting, we're going to take Rick. Rick, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Rick, where are you from and what's your question, please?
Calgary here. And I was just wondering what our strategy is to deal with the progressive media. They certainly played a part last year.
It's a great point. Now, here's the thing. I because I came from the media, don't hold that against me. I think some of you knew that. I was in the media for 6 years, and my husband had a 25-year career in the media. The way I've looked at the media is that they do strive for balance, but maybe in a way you're not expecting. And what we've observed with the media is that if they pound on us for a while, they figure they have to balance it out by pounding on the other guys for a while. And we've had our share of very good media, we think, over the last 2 years. So there's no doubt that the PCs, having had so much negative press over the last while, are likely to get some positive press for the time being. We've always taken the view that the media has a job to do. We're going to maintain a professional relationship with them, but we certainly know that they're not our friends, and that they'll one day they might give us a good story, the next day they'll give us a bad one. But we also know that our key to getting our message out is to do more of our direct marketing, more town halls like this, more in-person town halls, more mailers, as was suggested by one of the earlier callers, more emails out, more YouTube videos, more ways of doing the direct contact with voters. And with the new technologies that we have today, we do have the ability to get through that media filter. So I don't hold it against the media, that sometimes they're a little bit unfair and sometimes they're a little bit slanted, because I do feel like we get we do get fairly balanced coverage over the long run. I don't think that the PCs are feeling like they've been treated very favorably in the last number of months, whereas we think that we've done a pretty good job of getting out our criticism.
Thank you so much on that. Let's go to our last polling question. It's a pretty simple one. Press 1 if you'd like to make a donation. Somebody will call you in the next couple of days. These are donations to cover the cost of telephone town halls. Again, somebody will get in touch with you in the next couple of days. All you do is have to press 1 if you want to call back. So if you'd like to donate and you want to call back, so you can donate, please press 1. Press 1 on the keypad on your phone. We really appreciate your participation on that. Next, we are going to take Kim. Kim, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Kim, where are you from, and what's your question, please?
I'm from Sturgeon County, and my question is in regards to vetting candidates. The last election, we had a candidate who had a blog on the Internet that nobody caught. The Internet is a great tool to get information out, but it can work against you as well. My question is, whose responsibility is it to vet the candidates with regards to Internet activity or anything that might be detrimental to their candidacy or nomination? Is it the party or the constituency association?
I would say it's both. What I would say is leading up to the last election, remember we did have a very lean crew that we were operating with. We only had 7 party staff. We only had, I think, 7 staff in the legislative offices, 4 in the party offices, compared to the thousands that they had on the other side. So now that we have a large number of staff, we have more on the party side. We have a number of our legislative and constituency staff who volunteer for the party in their off hours, and so we do have a lot more people that we can rely on to be able to do this kind of work. Vitor Marciano, who's my senior advisor, is leading a team that is overseeing that work, not only of vetting our own candidates, but also looking at what's happening on the other side as well, because we know that there are some potential intemperate statements that have been made by sitting MLAs and also their future candidates too. So we have a much more sophisticated approach to tracking that information, keeping it archived. And I think you can see with the kind of stories that we've broken over the last 2 years that we're actually getting quite good at being able to identify things that are going to be problematic for the other side. So we're turning that same eye onto our own candidates. The other thing too is I think that what I have heard from our members is that, and I didn't feel like I had this backing last time, I felt that when we got into the campaign with our team of 87, that my job as leader was to support every member of the team. I have since heard that if any one of our candidates says something that is so indefensible, they actually want me to fire them. And so I'm hoping that that we don't get to that point, because we do have our team that is looking at every nominee. We do have our LCNC, our local candidate selection process, that can recommend against approving a candidate. We've got our provincial candidate selection committee that can also recommend against approving a candidate. And ultimately, the buck stops with me, that if I find something so egregious and we missed it and it happens in a campaign and I can't defend it and it's going to affect us all, then we'll have to make sure that we know that that candidates are prepared to fall on their sword if they know that it's going to affect all of us. So I think we've got a number of different learnings that we had from the last campaign, and my great hope is that we go into the next campaign with 87 candidates that we can all feel proud of, and that we don't have those problems that we deal with. But I'm pretty sure that you'll see that we'll deal with them differently if we end up being in a similar situation next time.
Let's take another question right away from Jason. Jason, welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Jason, where are you from and what's your question, please?
Hi, I'm from Strathmore. Nice to talk to you again, Danielle. I've just got a few concerns and questions that are largely based on the last 3 poll questions and some of the ways we're thinking about the internet and getting the message out. I've noticed that I've been a member since day one, and I contribute every year, and I try and do the best I can to help, but nobody's ever invited me to be a Facebook friend or invited me to Twitter or sent me text messages. You guys are asking poll questions about how best to communicate and spending money on town hall meetings, but we're really not using social media as effectively as we should. The prime example of that, of course, is Obama, who absolutely crushed the right in the United States in the first election of both raising money and hammering the message to the youthful as well as anybody else using his smartphone. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the budget or any plans in the future to develop a social media platform with dedicated people working around the clock as part of some of those last questions and the poll questions, to be able to utilize that tool and to really expand the base of the party. I mean, as we're aware, if you get on Facebook and yes, you target the current members, they also have the ability through their thousands and thousands of friends and networks to be able to essentially tell the truth, which also bypasses the left-wing media. As long as you do your research and the things you're saying using that continuous social media platform, there's nothing that they can really do. So again, rather than ramble on, the question is, what are we planning to do about our social media platform to use it effectively?
It's a great question, Jason. So we've done not badly on getting people on Facebook and Twitter. We've got 31,000 people who have liked our Facebook page, and we also have 21,000 people who are following me on Twitter. Our Facebook graphics have been particularly effective. I would say that it was 2 graphics in particular that Brock Harrison's team put together that brought this premier down. One of them was just a simple graphic that showed what Premier Redford spent on her South Africa trip versus the Premier of Nova Scotia. The other one was showing what the Chief of Staff of the United States President made versus what her Chief of Staff made, which was double. And between those two, it ended up getting seen by more than 500,000 people and created an incredible storm. So I take your point that Facebook can be really powerful and really effective. This is part of the reason why, after a lot of back and forth and discussion at Executive Committee and the Election Readiness team, that we decided to move to Nation Builder as the front-end interface with our members. Now, we just launched our new website on April the 23rd. We are building into it a My Wild Rose section, very similar to what Barack Obama did in the first election that he won. So it becomes something that gets interconnected on your profile with all of the different ways in which you communicate it through social media. I understand that the office is working with individual constituencies to roll this out. I think we've got 30 of our 87 constituencies well underway to also using Nation Builder and a website that has that interactivity. And so this is why we're really ramping that side up so that we're ready across all 87 constituencies and with our central party website to be able to make best use of all of those different media. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on Nation Builder and how we're going to get to the end that Jason was talking about, but that to me is one of the big advantages about moving to this new platform.
Well, Danielle, it's Dave here again. The only thing is we hear you and we're on it. This has been brought up. It's exactly the way you described. It's the tools they use. Nation Builder is a product that came out of California where they've watched these trends. And so we're moving as quickly as we can to do exactly what you asked for. It's a good idea.
And I highly recommend them, too, for all that matter. I use Nation Builder as well myself. So anyway, we're running out of time, and it's time to wrap up. But I wanted to remind people, if you didn't get your question in, whether you press 0 or not or got to an operator, please leave us a message at the end of this call. But we need your name, your phone number, and preferably your email address so we can get back to you. And be patient. There's going to be a lot of people who leave messages. It's not going to all happen at once. So, again, leave us your name, your phone number, and your email address, and, of course, your comment or question. And we really appreciate that. Danielle, bring us to the finish line, if you would, please.
Sure. Just one final word. I know that there were a number of people in the queue wanting to ask policy questions. We did want to make sure that we got through some of the structure questions for how we're operating as a party and how we're preparing for the election. So if you have policy questions, there's a couple things I would recommend. Go onto our party website, wildrose.ca, and go under Member Passed Policy. You will see that there are 350 policies that have been passed by the members who have attended our annual general meetings. If you think that there's a policy that is missing that you think should be put forward, that was part of the reason we started off talking about the process we're going through to debate those at our AGM in November. And any member can put it forward to their constituency association for consideration, and it would come to the floor. So if you think that there's some policy that's missing, this is a golden opportunity for you to make sure that you help us fill those gaps. And then finally, just keep an eye open over the coming weeks and months. We are going to be relaunching the Green Book based on the policies that were passed at our AGM, but repackaging them in a way that centers them around the key different policy areas that we've heard are important to Albertans. So we look forward to having your feedback. You can always let us know at info@wildrose.ca if there's anything that's on your mind that we should know. If you're interested in seeking out a candidacy, nominations at wildrose.ca is the place to go. And thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Good night.